Alright, so here is page 3 of our quarter 3 review. Let's go ahead and start with number 1 and make sure we can see. Okay, hopefully the volume is still okay / working. Okay, first one, what are the real roots? Remember, roots is another word for x-intercepts. So basically we're looking for the actual x-intercepts. And that can be just done with Desmos or your calculator. Right? So if we go ahead, you plug it in, you look for your x-intercepts, and you notice there's only one, and it's just at -3. Let me go ahead and bring up Desmos Test node just for us to see. Okay, so here is Desmos. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to plug in our equation y equals x to the 3rd power plus 27. Notice here it is, click it, and there's our x-intercept at -3. Okay. And you could also do it with your calculator. So now we're going to go ahead and look at the next problem. And we see we have two parentheses being multiplied by each other. And again, like on the first page, that just means AKA FOIL. And we're just going to go ahead and distribute everything. So 3 times 3 is 9. 3 times the square root of 5 is just 3 root 5 because the 3 is outside the square root and the 5 is inside, and we can't multiply 3 and 5 that way. Then we go ahead and distribute again, so this becomes -3 square roots of 5. But then we have negative square root of 5 times positive square root of 5. So we know a negative times a positive is just automatically going to be negative. But this is a square root, and that's a square root. So that's technically square root of 5 times square root of 5. And since they're inside together, we can multiply them, and we get 25. But the square root of 25 is 5. So that simplifies right there to just 5. And we also notice square root of 3 square roots of 5 minus itself is 0. So those now cancel out, which means we are left with 9 minus 5, which is just 4. So after foiling, we notice that we only got one number, which is 4. The next one, this next problem is pretty tricky, right? So it says 2 of the zeros of a function are x equals 4i and x equals 3. What is or are the factors of the function? And then what is the full function? Before we actually get to the factors, you have to remember that when you have an imaginary number, there's always two versions. Right? We have the conjugates. They always come with a buddy. So if we have a positive 4i, the opposite also has to be part of our solution. It isn't a 0. We also have to have negative 4i. Okay, remember conjugates are always together. So after that, we can go ahead and write the factors. I want to do the 3 first. Remember, if we have x equals 3 and we want to get the factors is something equals 0. So if I move the 3 over, I subtract it, and we get x minus 3. And when those go away, we get 0. So this is the factor. X minus 3 is the factor of x equals 3, because we reversed it. So now if we look at x equals 4i, if we subtract 4i on both sides, we get x minus 4i. And then the conjugate comes in. If we add 4i on both sides, we get x plus 4i. So there we go. We have our 3 factors. So the 3 factors were part 1. Part 2 says what's the polynomial function, and that's going to involve more foiling. And in fact, we're going to have to foil twice. The trick is you always foil your conjugates first, because if we remember in previous units, when you FOIL conjugates, the i's disappear. And let's go ahead and see why. So I'm going to leave the x minus 3 here. I'm going to go ahead and distribute these guys. So x times x is x squared. This becomes positive 4ix. This becomes negative 4ix. And then we have negative 4 times 4. That's negative 16. And there's an I times I. That's the same thing as x times x. X times x is x squared. So I times I is also I squared. I'm going to go ahead, close that. We notice those are the same thing. They cancel out, which is part 1. And then if you remember, I squared is actually negative 1. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to rewrite what we have. We have x minus 3. And then now, we still have the x squared here. But we have negative 16 times negative 1. That actually becomes positive 16. Notice how when we FOIL this, the i's disappeared. That means we used the correct conjugate and we FOILed correctly. Okay? Now, we are going to FOIL again what we have left. So that becomes x to the 3rd power plus 16x minus 3x squared, and then 3 times 16, let's go ahead and try that. 3 times 16 is 48, and it's negative. Right, we can't combine anything, so you could leave it there, or if you wanted to, you could just change the order in standard form. X cubed minus 3x squared plus 16x minus 48. Both are acceptable. It's just usually we mathematicians like it in a nice aesthetic way where you go down from highest exponent below. That's just generally how you see it. Okay. That wasn't too bad. Again, remember, imaginary numbers always come with conjugate pairs, and square roots come with conjugate pairs. Okay. They have that buddy system. Next up, we're going to go ahead and do the next problem. So the next problem, we have a fraction divided by another fraction. And when we have that, we're going to do something called keep, change, flip. We keep the first fraction. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep the x squared plus 9x plus 20 over x squared minus 25. I'm changing the division to be multiplication, and then you flip your second fraction. So now x minus 4 is on top, and x plus 4 is on the bottom. Okay, next step is factor everything you possibly can. So we're going to go down here. I'm just going to do a giant thing here. X squared plus 9x plus 20. You can factor it any way you want, but you should get x plus 4, x plus 5. And then x squared minus 25, you should know that's a difference, so subtraction of a perfect square root, because the square root of 25 is 5. And since it's a difference, we can have a positive and a negative version. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to tack these on right next to it because it's still multiplication. Instead of 2 separate lines, I'm just going to make it one giant line, and I'm going to add my parentheses. Okay. After that, we're going to set our restrictions. So what x can't equal. And that's when you take your denominator and set everything equal to 0. So x plus 5 equals 0. Subtract 5 on both sides. We get negative 5. X minus 5 equals 0. Add 5 on both sides, we get positive 5. X plus 4, you should get negative 4. Okay. Now we see what cancels out. We have an x plus 5 here and an x plus 5 down there. And we have an x plus 4 here and an x plus 4 there. And we are left with x minus 4 over x minus 5. with our restrictions as part of our answers. We restrict it because when you have a fraction, remember you can never have 0 in the denominator. So we have to figure out which numbers, if we plug it into the bottom, gives us 0 so we can avoid those numbers. Okay. Last one is another division one, so we're going to do keep, change, flip. All right. So let's go ahead and do just that. So we keep the first one. So we're keeping the x plus 7 over x squared plus 5x minus 14. We are changing the division to multiplication. And we are flipping the second fraction. So now x plus 3 is on top. And x squared plus x minus 6 is on the bottom. We're going to go ahead and factor everything we can. X plus 7 we can't factor. And again, I'm going to combine these as one fraction because it's multiplication. Then x plus 3 doesn't factor either. So let's see, all we have to do is factor these two. So first I'm going to factor x squared plus 5x minus 14. Right, and you should get, let's see, x and x, 2 and 7. That should be plus 7 minus 2. Then I'm going to factor x squared plus x minus 6. That's x and x, 2 and 3, positive 2, positive 3, negative 2. Okay. Now we're going to go ahead and restrict our domain. So x minus 2 set equal to 0, we get positive 2. X plus 7 set equal to 0, we get negative 7. Again, x minus 2, if we get 2, we already have it, so there's no point in writing it again. Then x plus 3 set equal to 0, we get negative 3. Now I can go ahead and cancel out. We have x plus 7s and an x plus 3. So what are we left with? On the top, everything is canceled. So that means you're technically left with only 1 because you haven't gotten rid of the fraction. The top is still there. It's just you have only a factor of 1. And on the bottom, we have an x minus 2 and an x minus 2, or you can write it as x minus 2 squared. We will take both forms of that answer. And there's our final answer. Okay, that is the third page of our quarter test review. Go ahead, try the next one, and see how far you can get before you watch the next video. All right, see you guys next time.